The wind changed direction at 4:40 in the afternoon, and Tucker Vance was the only one in Ashwell County who seemed to notice. He was standing at the edge of a 210-acre soybean field off County Road 12, in Ashwell County, Missouri, holding a handful of dirt he had pulled from 6 inches down. He let it fall through his fingers. Then he walked back to his truck, a 1998 Ford F-250 with 214,000 miles on it, and made a phone call he had made 4 times already that week. He was asking the elevator in Danfield to push his delivery window back again. He was 19 years old. He had been running the family's remaining 340 acres alone since March, since his father's heart gave out in the parts aisle of the Case IH dealership in Renfro. Most of the men who leased ground near him had already started their harvest. Tucker had not touched a header. By the following Tuesday, 3 separate neighbors had driven past that field slow enough to be noticed. None of them stopped. If you've ever watched someone hold their ground while everyone around them was certain they were wrong, stay with this one. Subscribe if you think patience is still worth something in this country. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and whether your family has ever bet everything on a read of the sky nobody else believed. Ashwell County sits in the southeast corner of Missouri, in the flat Boothiel ground where the soil is dark and heavy and the elevation barely moves for 40 miles. The Vance family had farmed the same ground since 1961, when Tucker's great-grandfather, Earl Vance, bought 160 acres off a retiring cotton farmer for $38 an acre. By the time it reached Tucker's father, Dale, the operation had grown to 340 acres, split between soybeans and milo, leased in part from a trust managed out of Cape Girardeau. Tucker had spent 4 years in the Ashwell County FFA chapter and had planned, before his father's death, to attend 2 years at Three Rivers College for an AG business certificate. Instead, he graduated high school in May and was running the planter by the second week of June. What he had, instead of a diploma, was his grandfather Earl's notebooks, 11 of them, kept in a cigar box in the shop, dating back to 1968. Earl had recorded barometric readings, wind shifts, and harvest dates in a cramped hand, cross-referenced against yield. Tucker had read every page twice. The pressure to sell and get out was constant and specific. A land investment firm called Meridian AgCap, based in St. Louis, had sent Dale 2 letters in the 2 years before his death, offering $2,850 an acre for the owned portion of the farm. After the funeral, they sent a 3rd letter to Tucker directly, addressed to the estate of Dale Vance, offering $3,100 an acre and a 30-day closing window. Tucker did not respond to that letter. He also did not tell his mother about it for 6 weeks. By the last week of September, every other operation within 8 miles of the Vance farm had begun combining beans. Ted Rollau, who leased 900 acres to the east, finished his harvest on September 24th and told Tucker, at the co-op counter in Danfield, that waiting past the last week of September in this county was just giving grain away to the weather. Tucker did not argue. He bought 2 bags of desiccant he did not need and drove home. On September 26th, Tucker visited the University of Missouri Extension office in Renfro and asked the agent, a man named Gary Holcomb, whether there was any documented correlation between early autumn barometric drops and late September derecho activity in the Boothiel. Holcomb pulled 2 publications from a filing cabinet, neither of which addressed the question directly, and told Tucker that in 22 years, he had never seen a September storm system serious enough to justify holding a full crop past its maturity window. His mother, Carol, who worked 3 days a week at the Renfro branch of First State Bank, told him on September 27th that the bank would not extend the operating note past October 15th regardless of field conditions. She did not say it unkindly. She said it because it was true, and because she had the loan paperwork open on the kitchen table when she said it. Tucker did not raise his voice at any of them. He wrote down what each person said with the date in a spiral notebook he had started buying in bulk from the Dollar General in Renfro. Then, on the evening of September 27th, sitting at his father's desk, he decided he would give the crop 5 more days, and that he would tell no one his reasoning until it either mattered or it didn't. The pivot came from Earl's 9th notebook, the one covering 1980 through 1984. Tucker had read it before, But on the night of September 27th, he was looking for something specific. Any year Earl had recorded a wind shift in the last week of September paired with a pressure drop below 29.70 inches. He found one entry, dated September 29, 1983. Wind swung SW to due N by evening. Barometer 29.61 and falling. Left beans standing. Storm hit Renfrew 2 days later. Ours stood. Cordell's did not. Tucker did not know who Cordell was. He never found out. What mattered was that the pattern in front of him, the wind at 4:40 that afternoon, swinging northeast, the barometer reading of 29.64, he had recorded off his father's old aneroid gauge, matched Earl's entry almost exactly. He did not call anyone. He walked back into the shop and started checking chains. The work itself began the next morning. Tucker's plan was not to avoid the storm but to prepare the crop and the ground to survive it standing, and to be positioned to combine within 18 hours of it passing. He started by walking all 210 acres of the beans in question, checking pod moisture with a handheld tester borrowed from Gary Holcomb's office, logging readings from 14 separate points in the field in his notebook. The average reading came back at 16.2%, 6 points wetter than harvest ready, which was itself part of his reasoning. Wetter beans, he had read in one of the extension bulletins Holcomb gave him, held to the stalk better in high wind than fully dry ones. He spent $340 reinforcing the header on the family's 1995 John Deere 9500 combine, replacing 2 worn sickle sections and a bent guard he'd been ignoring since August. He spent another $180 on a second battery and a set of chains for the F-250, in case the field roads went to mud. On September 29th, he drove 11 miles to Poplar Bluff to rent a portable grain dryer from a farm supply store, at a cost of $95 a day, reasoning that if the storm dropped rain on standing beans he'd need to pull moisture back out fast once he did combine. The setbacks came quickly. On September 30th, the header chain he just replaced jumped its sprocket during a test run, and he lost 4 hours pulling the housing apart in the shop. On October 1st, the rented dryer's propane regulator failed on delivery, and the supply store in Poplar Bluff couldn't get him a replacement part until the following afternoon. He drove there himself and waited 2 hours in the parts counter line rather than lose another day. Word had gotten around Ashwell County by then that Tucker Vance hadn't cut his beans. At the Casey's in Renfrew, a man he didn't recognize asked the cashier, loud enough for Tucker to hear from the next aisle, whether the Vance kid was planning to harvest before Christmas. Tucker bought his coffee and left without responding. Carol heard a version of the same joke from a customer at the bank on October 2nd. She came home and asked him directly if he was sure. He told her about Earl's notebook. She read the entry herself twice and did not bring it up again. By October 3rd, the barometer on his father's gauge had dropped to 29.58. The National Weather Service office in Paducah issued a severe thunderstorm watch for the Bootheel region that afternoon. Upgraded to a tornado watch by 6:15 p.m. Tucker moved both combines and the grain cart into the pole barn, staked down the portable dryer, and checked his equipment one final time. Pete Doheny, who farmed the section directly north of the Vance ground and had said nothing to Tucker in 3 weeks, pulled his truck onto the shoulder of County Road 12 at around 6:40 that evening and got out. He stood at the fence line for close to 20 minutes, watching the beans move in the wind, before he said anything at all. "You're really leaving it standing," he said. Tucker told him yes. Doheny asked what made him sure. Tucker told him about the notebook, the wind direction, the barometer reading. Doheny didn't respond to that directly. He put his cap back on, looked at the field one more time and got back in his truck. The storm system crossed Ashwell County between 9:50 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. that night, with wind gusts recorded at 61 miles per hour at the Renfrew Municipal Airport and 2.3 inches of rain. 3 grain bins were damaged 11 miles east, near Danfield, and a stand of corn belonging to Ted Rolau's neighbor was flattened along nearly 40 acres. Tucker's 210 acres of soybeans, still standing, took the wind at an angle that ran with the road direction rather than across it. A detail Earl's notebook had also mentioned, in an entry from 1979, though Tucker had not fully understood its importance until that night. By 6 a.m. the next morning, Tucker was in the field with a moisture tester again. The average reading had dropped to 13.1%, inside the ideal harvest range. He started the 9,500 combine at 7:40 a.m. and finished the field on October 5th, 2.5 days later. The final yield came in at 54.6 bushels an acre, sold at a cash price of $9.85 a bushel through the Danfield elevator. A total of roughly $112,900 for the 210-acre field. Rolau's neighbor, whose corn had gone down in the storm, salvaged less than half his expected crop. Meridian AgCap did not call again that fall. Tucker did not tell anyone at the co-op what his yield number was, though it became known anyway, the way numbers do in a county that small. He did not frame Earl's notebook or put it under glass. He used it again the following September and the September after that, and he began keeping his own barometric log in a fresh notebook, matching the format of the old ones in case someone needed it after him. Earl Vance died in 1991, 19 years before his great-grandson would need what he'd written down on a September evening in 1983. He had no way of knowing the entry would matter to anyone. He wrote it down anyway, the way he wrote down every wind shift and every pressure drop for over 20 years, because it was what a person did with a farm and a notebook and enough patience to fill both. Tucker Vance is 20 years old now. He still farms the 340 acres off County Road 12. He still buys his notebooks in bulk from the Dollar General in Renfro. Pete Doheny stops at the fence sometimes, in late September, and doesn't say much. He just looks at the wind in the beans, and at the boy who reads it the way his grandfather taught him to, without ever having met him at all.